Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. Stop begging for intimacy, she said. Just like that. Calm, dismissive, eyes still on her phone. The word begging hit harder than I expected. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true. I had been begging for attention, affection, connection. She said it with that quiet superiority people use when they've already checked out. I didn't argue. I just nodded, stood up from the couch, and left her there scrolling Amazon like nothing had happened. That night, something in me switched off. It wasn't pride or anger. It was clarity. If closeness had become a transaction, then I was done paying. For days, I barely spoke. I still made coffee every morning, still left for work at the same time. But the small things, checking her schedule, asking about her day, stopped. By the third night, she noticed. The silence had a weight to it. It wasn't cold, it was precise. I started sleeping on my side of the bed, facing the window. She didn't say anything, but I could feel her turning toward me in the dark, waiting for a conversation that never came. The same woman who once said I was too emotional now lay awake, restless, measuring every breath I took. By the end of the week, I started running before sunrise again. It felt good, clean air, empty streets. No noise except my steps hitting the pavement. When I got back, she was usually still in bed, pretending to sleep. I'd shower, grab a black coffee from Starbucks, and leave before she opened her eyes. She tried to fill the silence with routine, casual questions, polite comments, but I kept my answers short. There's a kind of peace in not explaining yourself anymore. The first real shift came on a Sunday morning. I was folding laundry when she walked into the room, wearing that look people wear when they've rehearsed something. She said she felt like we were drifting. I said nothing. Then she asked if I was seeing someone else. I told her calmly, "You told me to stop begging. I just listened." She didn't know how to respond. Her face flickered, pride fighting panic. She muttered something about not meaning it like that, but it was too late. The silence between us had become a mirror, and she finally saw what I'd been seeing for months, herself, detached, untouchable. By week 2, her tone had changed. The same woman who told me to stop asking for intimacy started sending texts that sounded like confessions. "Are you even coming home tonight? You've been quiet lately. I miss how we used to talk." I didn't reply to any of them. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to be understood. I was just gone, still there, but unreachable. She thought silence would make her free. She never expected it would make her desperate. By the second week, the silence had a rhythm of its own. I'd wake up, shower, grab my keys, and leave before she stirred. She used to complain about me leaving my coffee mug in the sink. Now it stayed spotless. She'd been right. I'd stopped begging. What she didn't realize was that I'd also stopped needing. At work, I noticed how light the air felt when no one expected me to explain myself. Even my coworker, Mike, said I looked different. "You seem done," he told me. I didn't correct him. Done wasn't defeat. It was freedom. That Friday night, I came home later than usual. The house was too quiet. She'd lit candles from Bath and Body Works, the kind she used to buy when she wanted to set a mood. Soft music played from her phone, but it didn't sound like her anymore. It sounded like effort. I walked past her without a word, set my keys on the counter, and went upstairs. The next morning, she tried again. She asked if I wanted breakfast, then added, too casually, that she missed how we used to eat together. I said I'd already grabbed something from Starbucks. Her smile barely held. That was the first crack. By the end of the weekend, she started leaving little things around. Old photos, small reminders. A picture from a trip to Chicago. My favorite hoodie folded on the chair. She wasn't saying it out loud, but every gesture was a quiet plea. "Remember us." I did remember. I just didn't miss it. Mike texted me that night, asking if I wanted to join him and a few friends for drinks. I almost said no, then realized staying home meant returning to her silence. So I went. It wasn't wild, just laughter, beer, and music, something that felt alive. I came back after midnight. She was sitting on the couch, pretending to read. Her eyes moved across the page, but I knew she hadn't taken in a single word. She asked if everything was okay. I said it was. She asked if I wanted to talk. I told her there was nothing to say. The words landed like a slow echo. For a moment, she looked smaller, like someone who'd lost her script. The next morning, she didn't speak at all. She just stood in the kitchen, watching me pour coffee. The mug trembled slightly in her hand when she asked if I'd be home for dinner. I told her I wasn't sure. That was the moment it clicked for her. Silence, the same weapon she'd once used, was no longer in her control. It belonged to me now. And for the first time, I saw fear behind her calm. Not of losing me, of realizing she already had. By week 3, the silence between us had become its own kind of presence, thick, patient, and impossible to ignore. I'd stopped checking her reactions altogether. When she laughed at her phone, I didn't look. When she dressed up before leaving, I didn't ask where she was going. It wasn't indifference, it was distance. The kind that doesn't announce itself but builds quietly, one unspoken word at a time. I started spending more time outside the house. Early runs turned into late-night drives, just me and the hum of the city. There was something peaceful about parking near the water with a black coffee from Starbucks and letting the night air fill the car. It was the first time in months that I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation. At home, she started reacting to my calm like it was a provocation. She cleaned more, cooked dinners we both ignored, and played music in the background that didn't belong to any real moment. One evening, I walked in to find her sitting on the couch, wearing the perfume she knew I liked. Chanel, sharp and familiar. The kind that used to make me stop whatever I was doing. Now it just smelled like memory. She asked if I wanted to watch a movie, something light, something we used to laugh at. I told her I had work. She nodded, but her eyes didn't. I could see her building walls made of routine. Every small act a desperate attempt to return to a version of us that no longer existed. Mike noticed the shift too. When we met for lunch that week, he said I seemed colder, but in a good way. "You've got control again," he told me. I didn't think of it that way. It wasn't about control, it was about clarity. When someone teaches you how to live without warmth, you start learning how to live without need. That night, she tried again. She mentioned missing the way we used to be, as if the words alone could resurrect something she had buried. I listened, nodded once, and said nothing. The pause after that was longer than anything we'd ever argued about. She went to bed early, but I stayed downstairs, sitting in the dim light of the kitchen, watching the reflection of the empty hallway. There was a strange peace in that stillness. It wasn't loneliness. It was realization. She had once told me to stop begging for intimacy. I finally understood what that meant. She never wanted closeness. She wanted control. And now that she didn't have it, the silence she built was turning on her, one quiet night at a time. The 4th week started with rain. It was one of those mornings when the air feels heavier than usual, the kind that makes you think too much. I watched the drops slide down the window while she moved quietly around the kitchen. She was dressed for work, but lingered longer than she needed to, pretending to check her phone. Her silence wasn't calm anymore. It was anxious. Every move looked calculated, as if she was trying to measure how far I'd drifted. She asked if I'd be home for dinner. I told her I didn't know. The truth was, I'd already planned not to be. Mike had invited me out again, and I said yes without hesitation this time. I didn't know her my evenings anymore. At the office, I noticed something I hadn't in a long time. People actually respected the quiet version of me. There's power in not oversharing. When you stop trying to be understood, others start paying attention. Even my boss said I seemed more focused, more grounded. Maybe that's what peace looks like, clarity mistaken for confidence. That night, when I got home, the house was dark except for the soft glow of the TV. She was sitting on the couch, her plate untouched. I walked past her and said nothing. She looked up, searching for a reaction, but I gave her none. It's strange how silence can hurt more than anger. It doesn't give the other person anything to fight against. It just leaves them facing themselves. A few days later, I came home to find her dressed up, makeup perfect, perfume heavy in the air again. She said she was going out with friends. I nodded. She waited for me to ask where, who, when she'd be back, but I didn't. I think that's when she realized the control she'd once held had completely vanished. When she came home later that night, I was already asleep, or at least pretending to be. The next morning, she tried to make small talk over coffee. Her voice was too bright, too careful. She said it felt like we were strangers. I told her quietly that maybe we were. She froze for a second, then smiled like she hadn't heard me. But I could see it in her eyes. That sentence landed exactly where it was meant to. Later that day, Mike texted me, "You're changing, man. Don't lose that." He didn't have to explain. Change wasn't about becoming someone new. It was about remembering who I used to be before I started begging for something that should have been given freely. By that weekend, I realized something simple. I wasn't punishing her. I was just done performing. By week 5, she started to notice the smallest things. The way I looked at my phone without expression, the fact that my side of the bed stayed perfectly made some mornings. She'd watch me get ready in silence, trying to predict whether I was pulling away or already gone. She didn't understand that those were the same thing. That Thursday, she came home early. The lights were low, rain tapping softly against the windows, and she looked at me like she had rehearsed something. She said we needed to talk. Her tone was softer than I'd heard in months, like she was afraid the wrong word might break something already cracked. She said she felt like I wasn't even trying anymore. I told her calmly that trying doesn't mean chasing. She stared at me for a long moment, as if waiting for me to flinch or fight back. I didn't. She asked what I wanted from her. I said I didn't want anything. And that was the truth. The absence of wanting had become its own kind of freedom. That weekend, Mike invited me to a friend's birthday downtown. I went. It wasn't anything special, just a few people laughing over food and cheap beer, but it felt good to exist without tension. There was a woman there named Hannah, a friend of a friend. She had an easy calm about her, the kind that didn't need to be loud to fill a room. We talked for a while, mostly about music and small things that didn't matter. For the first time in months, I laughed without feeling guilty. When I got home, she was awake, sitting on the couch with her laptop open but untouched. She looked up as I walked in and asked if I'd had fun. I said yes. She asked who was there. I listed a few names, nothing more. She nodded like it didn't bother her, but her eyes gave her away. Over the next few days, her routine shifted again. She stopped going out. She stayed home more, always finding reasons to be around when I was. She'd linger in the kitchen, ask small questions about my day, my plans, my phone. Her words were casual, but her tone wasn't. The control she once used so easily was now slipping through her hands, one question at a time. The silence between us was no longer peaceful. It had become a battlefield of restraint. Every quiet moment another reminder of who cared less. And this time, it wasn't me losing sleep. By Sunday night, she texted me while I was in the same house. "Are you coming upstairs?" I didn't reply. I just let the message sit there, glowing faintly on the screen like a confession she didn't mean to send. By the 6th week, the silence had stopped being something we shared. It had become something she fought against. She started filling the house with noise again, music playing in the background, the hum of the TV, even fake laughter over calls that ended too quickly. It was obvious. She was trying to drown out what couldn't be ignored. One night, she cooked dinner from scratch, something she hadn't done in months. The table was set perfectly, candles from Bath and Body Works flickering between us. Her phone turned face down for the first time in a long time. I could tell she had practiced this moment in her head. She said she thought we could reconnect. I told her quietly that I didn't think connection was something you could schedule. She smiled, but it wasn't real. She filled every silence with small talk, stories that didn't land, questions I answered with one word at a time. By the time dinner was over, she was laughing too loudly at nothing, pretending she still understood how to reach me. But she didn't. That version of me, the one who waited, explained, tried, was gone. Later that night, I went upstairs, took a shower, and stared at my reflection. I didn't recognize the man looking back. Not because he'd changed too much, but because he'd finally stopped shrinking to fit someone else's comfort. I remembered her words from weeks ago, the ones that started it all. Stop begging for intimacy. I smiled to myself. I had stopped. Completely. The next morning, she was quiet again. She moved around the kitchen like someone trying not to disturb a ghost. When I left for work, she followed me to the door and said she missed how we used to be. I told her softly that people don't miss each other. They miss control. She didn't argue. She just stood there, silent, watching me walk away. That day, Mike stopped by my office. He noticed the change before I said a word. "You look lighter," he said. He was right. Peace has a weight of its own, and mine finally felt manageable. When I got home that night, she was sitting on the porch, scrolling through her phone, pretending not to wait for me. Her face looked calm, but her eyes weren't. I walked past her with a polite nod and went inside. An hour later, I heard the sound of her phone buzzing again, then the quiet sobs she thought I couldn't hear. She had finally realized what I'd known for weeks. Silence wasn't revenge. It was release. And once you find peace in the quiet, you never trade it back for noise. By the 7th week, she stopped pretending the silence didn't bother her. I could see it in the way she moved, restless, uncertain, like someone trying to find their way through a room that used to be familiar but now felt strange. The confidence she once carried had thinned into hesitation. Even her reflection in the mirror looked different. That Monday morning, she made coffee for both of us. 2 mugs, just like before. She said it felt nice, like old times. I took one sip, thanked her, and walked out the door. No warmth, no pause, no conversation. Her eyes followed me all the way to the car, searching for any trace of the man she once controlled. But that man was gone. At work, Mike asked how things were going. I told him everything was quiet. He smirked and said that's when people start telling on themselves. He wasn't wrong. Silence has a way of exposing what noise hides. That evening, I came home later than usual. She was waiting in the living room, wearing the same perfume she used to wear when she wanted attention. The air smelled heavy, desperate. She said she wanted to talk. I sat down across from her, not out of curiosity, but courtesy. She started explaining things I hadn't asked about, how she'd been distant because of stress, how she hadn't meant the things she said that night. It sounded more like a confession than an apology. I just listened. When she realized I wasn't interrupting, she began to stumble over her words. She said she missed me, that she could change, that she wanted to make things right. I told her quietly that change isn't something you promise, it's something you prove. Then I stood up and went upstairs without looking back. Later that night, I heard her moving around, opening and closing drawers, maybe pretending to pack. She didn't leave. She just sat on the edge of the bed in silence, like a prisoner of her own choices. The next few days were fragile. She started making small gestures again, leaving notes, cooking dinner, texting during the day. But everything felt like imitation, a hollow echo of the person she used to be. I answered politely when I had to, but never with emotion. By the weekend, the silence had shifted again. It wasn't tense anymore, it was final. She wasn't fighting it now. She was drowning in it. And for the first time since that night, I realized I didn't need her to understand what she'd done. The silence had already taught her everything I never needed to say. By the 8th week, she started to look tired. The kind of tired that no sleep can fix. Her movement slowed, her voice softened, and for the first time, she seemed unsure of herself. I'd see her sitting by the window some mornings, staring outside like she was waiting for something that would never return. I didn't ask what she was thinking. I didn't need to. I already knew. One evening, I came home and found her sitting at the dining table with 2 plates already set. The food was untouched, candles flickering low, the same song playing she used to put on during better days. She looked up when I entered, eyes wide, like she was bracing for rejection before I even said a word. I hung my jacket, sat across from her, and waited. She said she wanted to start over. I said we already did. She didn't understand at first, so I explained quietly. This version of us isn't about saving what's gone. It's about learning how to live without pretending. Her expression broke for just a second, enough to show the panic she'd been hiding under calm. She started talking fast, filling the space between us with words she thought could fix something that had already died quietly weeks ago. I didn't interrupt. I didn't comfort. I just let her talk until her voice started to tremble. After dinner, she followed me into the hallway, asked if I still loved her. I stopped for a moment, then said, I did, deeply. But love doesn't survive where respect dies. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The quiet that followed said everything. Later that night, I sat in my car outside the house, just breathing. The air felt clean, almost new. I realized I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was simply done carrying the weight of something that had already been dropped. When I went back inside, she was sitting on the couch, scrolling through old photos on her iPhone. I saw a faint smile cross her face when she looked at one, me holding her hand at a concert, her laughing into my shoulder. Then the smile faded. She turned the screen off quickly, like she couldn't stand to see the difference between who we were and who we'd become. That night, I lay awake listening to the sound of rain against the window. For months, that silence used to feel heavy. Now it felt earned. And somewhere between the rhythm of the rain and her quiet breathing beside me, I realized the truth. I hadn't lost her. I had simply found myself again. By week 9, something in her finally broke. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that follows realization, not regret. She had stopped pretending. No makeup, no carefully rehearsed tone, no attempts to play calm. Just silence, heavy and unfiltered. That morning, I found her in the kitchen, sitting with a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. She looked up when I walked in, eyes swollen from a night without sleep. She said she didn't understand how I could be so calm. I told her I stopped confusing chaos for connection. She asked if I was done with her. I said I was done chasing someone who ran from peace. She didn't reply. She just nodded slowly, like the truth was a language she finally recognized too late. I left the house for a few hours that day. Drove with no destination, windows down, the air biting cold against my skin. I ended up at a small park on the edge of town, the kind of place we used to walk through when things were good. The benches were empty, the trees bare, the world almost still. I sat there for a while, thinking about how easily two people can become strangers. When I came home that night, she was waiting again, not in anger, but in something close to surrender. She said she'd been talking to her mother, that she'd told her things weren't working. She said her mom asked if she'd done everything she could to fix it. I didn't know what to say, she whispered, because maybe I only tried after I realized you stopped. I didn't respond. I just stood there, listening. She went on, saying she missed who I used to be, that she missed feeling wanted. I told her quietly, "You don't miss me. You miss the version of you that existed when I still cared." Her breath caught like the air had turned to glass between us. Then she just nodded. Later that night, she came into my office while I was working. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, then said she was sorry, not for what happened, but for not seeing me when I was still there. I looked at her and said, "Some things don't break. They just stop belonging." That was the first night she didn't try to close the distance between us. She just walked away, her footsteps fading into the quiet like the last line of a story that had already been written. By the 10th week, the house felt like a waiting room for something that would never arrive. The air was thin, quiet, almost hollow. She'd stopped talking completely, moving around me like I was a ghost haunting the life she used to own. The roles had reversed, and she knew it. I wasn't the one chasing peace anymore. I was living in it. That morning, she left early without a word. I didn't wonder where she went. I didn't check her phone or her location. The version of me who needed to know those things was gone. I made coffee, took a long shower, and left for work with the calm certainty of someone who finally stopped fighting a storm. When I got home that evening, her car was back in the driveway. The lights were on, but the house was quiet. I found her in the living room, sitting on the floor beside her suitcase. She looked up when I walked in, eyes red but steady. She said she'd been staying with a friend, that she needed time to think. She said the space made her realize how far she'd pushed me. I didn't interrupt. She told me she wanted to try again, but this time the right way. I didn't answer immediately. I just stood there, watching the woman who once told me to stop begging for intimacy, now struggling to find a reason to stay. After a long pause, I said, "I believe you needed to lose me to understand what I was worth. But I also needed to lose you to understand peace." She nodded, tears falling quietly, not the dramatic kind, just the slow surrender that comes with truth. She said she didn't recognize herself anymore. I told her softly, "That's because you met the version of me who finally stopped shrinking." The silence that followed wasn't sharp this time. It was calm, almost gentle. She stood up, walked over, and said she was sorry. I didn't say it back. Forgiveness wasn't something I needed to give. It was something I had already lived through. Later that night, after she went upstairs, I sat alone in the kitchen. The smell of her perfume still lingered in the air, faint and ghostly. My phone buzzed, a text from Hannah. Just one line, "Hope you're doing okay." I smiled, not because of what it meant, but because I finally had space to let something new in. Before heading to bed, I looked around the quiet house one last time. It didn't feel empty. It felt earned. She once told me to stop begging for intimacy. I did. And by the time she realized what that meant, I'd already learned the most important truth. Peace isn't what you find after love ends. It's what begins when you stop needing to be understood. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.